I definitely think that our body holds tension. And when we're really involved in our body and it's really tight, it stops, neurological processes for sure. I think that's why ketamine, what it does is because it disconnects a person from their body. And then, so I think the release is better. Now, for sure, the hypothalamus and the thalamus keep the score. Okay, like that I can say for sure. That's the core scorekeeping is there. Right, and that's an artifact of evolution. It's part of us.
Welcome back to Ketamine Connections. My name is Anna Krishtal. I'm so excited to be back here with you. Today on the show, we had Justin Lubin of Perspective Wellness, which is our first Midwestern guest. Perspective Wellness is in Milwaukee. And that was a really interesting conversation for me because I consider the Midwest to be more grounded in different mindsets, more fixed mindset, less growth mindset. And with ketamine being so innovative for everything that it's being used for, it takes a more progressive culture, than I consider the Midwest to be. That's why we see more clinics on the bookends of the country, and also why we see more ketamine offerings in urban centers, because that tends to be where we have more progress, whereas more rural areas are more traditional societies. And so I was really excited to talk to Justin about that. And boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong about how receptive the Midwest is to ketamine and how they're doing ketamine. And I really enjoyed this conversation because Perspective Wellness is a nonprofit. And what they do with this nonprofit model is that they have a lot of sliding scale options. So sliding scale is, if you're not familiar, it's like a pay what you can, right? Depending on your income, depending on what you can pay, you're able to slide the scale of so it kind of gives bumpers. And so they do sliding scale for veterans, first responders, and just people who need financial support. And that is something that I'm really passionate about, is how to make ketamine more accessible to everyone, because most insurances don't cover it. Some veteran organizations are helping out, but really accessing ketamine for people that wouldn't otherwise have access is something that I'm personally passionate about. And it was really, really refreshing to hear this model that they're doing over at Perspective Wellness. Justin is a lawyer turned psychedelic facilitator. And what I loved about this conversation as well was the peer-to-peer model. I'm hearing that more and more, whether it's, whoever is in the clinic, I'm hearing that they're seeing themselves more as mentors or peers, so that it's leveling the structure of the hierarchies that we've been experiencing in the medical system for a really long time. And I think that's really valuable. And Justin just had a really, really beautiful way of speaking about that. He talked about the dosage that they're using, which is a lower dosage than some of the other clinics that I've interviewed and had on. And I love that, again, because it just shows how many variations there are, right? In an earlier episode, you can go back and listen to, different ways of administering ketamine. But even within those ways of administering, you have dosage, you have so many other factors that I'm starting to see shine through in these different interviews. And so that was really beautiful to hear about, the way that they're using the medicine that is very a harm reduction model, meaning that they're moving slower than maybe some other clinics. There's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of like this population that they're serving. And, Justin talked about serving a more rural population, a more conservative population. And that's the population that this works for. And I think that's really great. There's people all over the country suffering with anxiety, depression, PTSD. And, my training has taught me that those are umbrella terms. And so within the umbrella terms, we need to have different ways of talking about this in a way that resonates with people. And I really, really felt that shine through in this conversation. We spoke about everything from getting unstuck, the neuroscience of safety, how ketamine can catalyze meaningful change without needing to have those high doses. And the whole conversation just was really thoughtful, really grounded. So we're about to dive in really quickly. If you haven't already left a review for the podcast, please do. It helps us out, especially if you're a returning listener. And the other exciting thing is that the ketamine preparation protocol is live. So if you are going into ketamine and you want to do it right, you want to prepare, you want to really set yourself up for success, for a life-changing experience, check out the show notes. All the links are there. And I'm so excited to share this offering with you. And without further ado, let's jump into the episode. A lot of listeners of this show are new to ketamine. And honestly, if that's you and you're anxious or just someone who likes to feel prepared, then you know that ketamine can be beautiful and it can also be overwhelming. Most clinics will not tell you this, but preparing for ketamine is what turns a confusing, chaotic trip into a grounded, life-changing experience. The ketamine preparation protocol is your go-to guide to walk you through that door with confidence. I've used this exact framework with clients since 2021 to help you feel safe, supported, and ready. And the feedback is always the same. I'm so glad I had this before my first journey. So whether you've already started ketamine or you're about to, if you're wondering, what if I do it wrong? Just don't wonder, prepare. Head to the link in the show notes and get started with the ketamine preparation protocol so that you can get the transformation that you deserve. Okay, Justin Lubin, Perspective Wellness, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
All right. As we start every episode with a beautiful guest, we say the same question. If you can go back and tell the you before you started all this anything, what would you say?
That's a really good question. What you were hoping for when you started this actually happened.
Oh, I got chills everywhere.
That's what I would say.
What
Absolutely.
you were hoping for when you started all this actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What a powerful message of hope and faith, right? Because I'm assuming that the version of you that you're communicating to is questioning that, is maybe a little bit in the dark, kind of walking that path of faith.
Well, it's really like faith is having a direction. Like hope in like I'm Jewish and I was Orthodox Jewish for many, many decades. And I learned Hebrew really, really well. And the word hope in Hebrew is tikvah. And the root of the word is kav, which means like a line, like to have like a direction. And like even when we work with clients, a lot of times the hope comes when they start to see there's a way out, where they don't feel constrained by limited, like a hopelessness. And hopelessness really, in a lot of respects, translates into that there's no direction. There's no direction. It's just kind of just circling in an endless loop. And hence we hear a lot, I'm sure you do when you work with clients, like, I'm stuck. Like if I was to get $1 for every time I hear I'm stuck when I do an initial consult with clients, I'd definitely be able to go out for like a really fancy sushi dinner that would cost a few $100.
Yeah. And what do you tell clients? Because I know what I say when clients say that they're stuck, and we can't really be stuck because our cells are regenerating, our heart is beating, the earth is moving, right? So the idea of stuck is really a construct in the mind. So what is it that you tell clients when they say, I'm stuck?
Well, usually that stuck thing comes in initial consult when they talk about stuck, and I'll say, what do you mean by stuck? And usually it's like, I've been trying everything and it's just not working. A lot of times too, we work with a lot of clients who have concurrent therapy, which is wonderful because our model is a facilitation model where when we started this, the whole idea was we're a nonprofit and we wanted to make this accessible for people. So one of those things, because my day job, I'm chief operating officer of a very large mental health clinic. And we have about 45 therapists, 2 psych NPs, and I'm very familiar with the cost of therapy. And when I was trained at Ketamine Training Center with Phil Wilson, who was gracious enough to give me a dispensation as a non-clinician to do that, I looked around and what people were charging, and I'm like, you're never going to make this accessible for people. So I said, but what if we used facilitators instead of therapists? Me being the first facilitator. And at that time, the legislation in Colorado and Oregon wasn't really on the horizon yet, where facilitation was part of the care continuum. And so we started in Milwaukee. We had a nurse practitioner who trusted me, who's known me for a long time. He's like, I trust you and I'll write prescriptions for you. At that time, we did all rapidly dissolving tablets. Now we do much more intramuscular injection, which is, I find, is a better route of administration. But this idea of facilitation, really more of a peer-to-peer model. And there's evidence that shows peer-to-peer facilitation models in terms of relational frameworks are actually more beneficial than hierarchy in the therapeutic space. But when we come in with a lot of clients who have good therapy, back to the stuck, sometimes when people have therapy, even if it's good therapy, it's almost like, imagine you're in the 1880s and you're in a stagecoach wagon. And in the work they're doing in therapy, you're creating real stuff, but it weighs the wagon down and it gets stuck in the mud. And I think that ketamine in particular of psychedelics really helps people get unstuck. It's kind of like a big heave, like, whoa, and then you get some momentum, and then that therapy starts getting catalyzed and hopefully actualized, which is nice.
I love that. As you're speaking, I have this image of and I don't think this is the way you were saying it, but therapy being kind of like a horse-drawn wagon where it's slow and maybe you hit a bump and it takes a while to recover. And then I'm imagining ketamine is almost like stepping onto a rocket ship and just kind of taking off.
Well, we try not to launch our clients into outer space. So I just like the heave. It just gets it moving again. And very much our philosophy with ketamine, when we talk to clients and we do consults, we tell them, like, we could shoot you to Andromeda, but we're not going to. And I think one of the things we pioneered in our clinic is really going low and slow with the medicine. When this first started in 2021, 2022, in the Big Ten Ketamine, which used to be a Google group, now it's a circle. But when it was on Google, it was really great. It was some really amazing people in the early days who would write on it, really just thought-provoking stuff and material. And there was this tendency for a lot of people, especially people who have access to the needle, to give people a lot of medicine. And kind of this idea of really inducing these, putting people really far out. And although that's tapered back now, because at lower doses, and when I'm talking lower doses, I'm talking like 0.6 to 0.8 milligrams per kilogram, bifurcated into two shots. That's what we do in our clinic typically. That what you see is wonderful patterns. Like, we have incredible data that we collect, and we know that ketamine reliably, for example, over 80% of our clients report a deep felt experience during their journey of feeling safe, comforted, okay. And that's reliable, which is wonderful. That's why I got so fired up when I started doing this a lot. I was like, look at all these patterns.
Yeah, I geek out on patterns. Also, my background is hypnotherapy. And for me, that's kind of what I work with clients on if they're feeling stuck is, okay, there's a pattern here that's repeating, right? And so let's find, it's like if you're on a merry-go-round, let's find the exit out of that pattern. And I've seen it work in so many different ways with different, forms of administration when we're talking about ketamine. And also, I think what you're saying too, the model that supports the clients that goes beyond just the ketamine itself, right? So having, like you were saying, the peer-to-peer support, having you said a lot of your clients are already working with therapists, so they're already doing the work, and the ketamine helps to jumpstart it to help get it, make it more effective. And so there's so much more that goes into the ketamine model of healing that goes beyond just the ceremony, just the ketamine itself.
Sure. I mean, ketamine, the cool part about ketamine is that, listen, it's a wonderful medicine standalone. Like sometimes I'll have clients call up, and because we're a nonprofit and we're number one on Google, if you type like ketamine therapy near me, we come up and we have great reviews, and it's certainly very cool what we do. If you look at it, you're like, oh, that's what I want. This is very much if we could design a Michael Pollan type ketamine experience for people that's accessible and affordable. And just to give you an idea on the affordability component, we charge for a full psych med intake with our nurse practitioner, and then a journey cycle, which involves a preparation virtually with a facilitator, which is usually 40 minutes through an hour, and then in person in our clinic up to 3 hours for a journey, and then a reflection session after a week later, and then also what's called the journey note, where we type up everything the client says, and also a full integration plan where we work with them to create an integration plan. For all of that, we only charge $380.
Wow.
And if they're on Medicaid or first responder or veteran, we give them an automatic 40% discount. So it's really doing that. We're lucky. We have a good benefactor who helps us out. But it's really wonderful when people get this robust container. And if they have a therapist, they see their therapist, they come work with us, and they go back to their therapist. So it's a different framework because it's a facilitation model, which is really essentially, we don't engage in speculations for the client. We don't try to get into meaning interpretation or, it's really nurturing what's coming out of the journey and capturing it, helping them crystallize it into language and memory. And it's really cool. I learn a lot from my clients. So it really is very cool. I feel like I crowdsource human wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. All the time. Yes. And just to give a little reference point for whoever's listening and hearing that, that 380 price point right now, we're recording in 2025. I think the national average for one ketamine session is about $400 to $600. So for a client to get that level of support of preparation, the session, and then integration support that guides them into their integration phase is really, really supportive.
Right, because usually an IV, one infusion will be $450. Exactly. And that's just for an hour IV infusion.
Exactly.
But most people who are doing what we're doing, they're charging over $1,000. Which is cool because people need it. I mean, unfortunately, the people who most need it, they just can't afford it. It's just so expensive. And it's just, so we're fortunate to be able to do it. Like I said, we have great clients. And I think that when clients come to us, they're self-filtering out. That's why when we went out and put our services out there, we called it psychedelic ketamine, just to differentiate that we're an insight-driven process. And earlier we were talking about ketamine because pharmacologically it's very beneficial. Sometimes if people reach out to us and they're maybe presenting with active suicidal ideation, you can just tell by talking to them, they're not really so insight-driven. I might refer them to go to IV ketamine. Sometimes people they're in such a pit, they need medicine. And it's very effective. So our sweet spot really is definitely when people already come in with some type of understanding that their depression, their anxiety is rooted in some type of CPTSD, which is typically the pattern. We're in Wisconsin. This is a place where the last generation had a lot of tough love without the love. And we see a lot of that.
Yeah, I have some Midwestern clients as well, and it's a very, very different culture. And that's actually one of my points of curiosity, because from what I know about the Midwest is that it is rooted in tradition and it is rooted in sort of different ways of thinking that, sometimes have different stigmas on mental health, seeking help. And so I'm wondering how you're seeing that change, obviously operating this clinic in Milwaukee.
So it's really interesting. So when I started this, I thought we were going to get a lot of what I call PCs, psychedelic curious. And that's not what we saw at all, right from the get-go. We saw people who are just struggling. They don't know what to do. And, I call it the little old lady from Sheboygan, which is like a more rural town that's north of us. And they've never smoked pot. They've never done drugs, but they're suffering. And they've been on some type of antidepressant since they were 19 years old. That 50 to 60-year-olds today, they're really sort of like the people who were that first wave with the big promise of psychiatric medications. And it just hasn't worked. And they look at themselves. I have treatment-resistant depression, but no one ever told them that the medicines really don't work for most people in the first place. So it's hard to have treatment-resistant depression if the treatments aren't really that great in the first place. Although we're agnostic as to medication. My thing with clients is it working for you? Great.
Right.
That's cool. I don't have a soapbox about
I
medications.
don't either. I think for me personally, it's like if we're going to get on a soapbox about psychiatric medicine, like where do we separate ketamine from that? Because the soapbox is seek help, right? The soapbox is find what works. And if it's the psychiatric medicines that help people, then it helps people. And it's a lot like, you know, get the thing that helps you get out of that rut, out of that stuck energy, out of that merry-go-round that you're on, and then you have more choices, then you're able to be resourceful. But the thing that most people don't know about the psychiatric medicines, and that I didn't either, was that they're not meant to work long term. So they're supposed to relieve symptoms, and then they're not meant to be on them for so long, which is why people cycle through medications so often.
Yeah, I mean, I see the stacks that people come in with, and it's horrifying because it's guesswork. They're not, and there's a lack of informed consent. We're very into informed consent. This is psychedelic work, so a lot of it is informed consent. Like someone calls up with anxiety, what do you think the outcome? And I tell them, I said, we're not going to get rid of your anxiety. But what we can do is, in the short term, if you can make space for that anxiety and notice it as it arises and be less reactive towards it, that we can work towards. Because those grooves of anxiety have been going for like 20 years. Now, the hope is over time they get mitigated and changed, and we shift, and neuroplasticity is a real thing. And I think that with the challenges with a lot of clients, like they don't realize the medicine they're taking is antipsychotic and it was never approved for depression. And so there's just a lot of that going on. And then also the flip side is the psychiatric world gets on the ketamine wagon. They treat it like it's just another medicine. They forget that it's a controlled substance and it makes you high.
Yeah.
And, whether you're taking daily ketamine or whatever it is, and it's just people forget. And I think that's because in America we don't have a history with ketamine as an as an addiction that people know about. But in Europe, for sure, it's a thing. And I'm very concerned what I see now. We've had a lot of clients and they go with us, and it's still expensive for people. I mean, even if you do 3 journeys, it's like $800, $900. That's a lot of money for people who don't make a lot of money. And so they might go to like one of the online ketamine companies that really are selling themselves with statements that are just hyperbolic, irresponsible. And their mills, they're funded by VC, and that's why they can be at the top of the rankings. And they're inducing this idea of like, oh, just take your ketamine; it's a new miracle pill. And I'm just like, I mean, have a rough day and just go home and take 100 milligrams. Just come on, man. What are you talking about? That's a big thing, and we're going to see that. We're going to see some blowback. I mean, fortunately, DEA is starting to crack down a little bit, and some of the bigger pharmacies. But I'm concerned about that because, and I have a bias. I'm a psychedelic person. So you have a journey, you let it percolate, you use this as a catalyst for non-medicinal growth. And then you have another journey to catalyze new stuff that you've grown and developed. So I am biased.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is what most people don't realize. And that's one of my biggest sort of intentions with starting this platform and just getting this information out there is, you spoke earlier about the well-paved grooves, right? Like the anxiety is a well-paved groove. And what people don't realize is that without the right support, right? You take the ketamine in whatever form it is, whether you're doing it at a clinic with with professional support, or you're doing it at home, which is a little bit more DIY. You do that, and then you go back to your old patterned way of thinking, you go back to your anxiety, then unfortunately, you're taking that window of neuroplasticity and digging in deeper into an undesirable state of being.
Oh yeah, I can flip that way. That's why we encourage clients to view this as part of a personal retreat process where carve out a few days for yourself, avoid stress. Like the last thing you want to do is you have a really bad scene at home and you do a ketamine journey, you go right at home with a bad thing. And because neuroplasticity can work both ways. And so like we've learned, like there's certain clients we won't work with And we always give our clients, we tell them if anything comes up. So we have basically a 0-day cancellation policy.
Okay.
Like, we've never charged anyone for canceling, even the day of, because it's psychedelic.
Exactly.
I'm a hippie from Santa Cruz, California. I would never be like, it's your acid day, go take your dose. And you're like, well, I just had a key employee just steal my trade secrets, which happened. I'm involved in family litigation. It happens. And these are really stressful things for people. And things do, because ketamine is very much like a dreamlike type of medicine. Like it says in the old book Ecclesiastes, from much concern comes a dream. And so these can seep in for good or for bad. Like I recently had a client, a really cool lady, and she's been working with us now for like 3 years, and she's down to like every 6 to 10 months she'll come in and kind of get a tune up for herself, and usually she has a very euphoric, really happy journeys, which is what people have for the most part. But then recently she had a dark one, and that's always interesting because we hadn't had one of those in a while. And it turns out it was a grief journey because her best friend, who was her best laughing friend, irreplaceable friend. Sometimes you get friends and you're lucky enough to have them where you just see them and you're just happy. And it's a gift. And this person had passed away. And it was the day before her journey was the anniversary, where there's a lot of action going on, talking to the person's mom. And that came right into the journey. So it didn't take me to figure out. It wasn't this deep repressed grief. It was like, but it was unprocessed. And she got a lot of benefit in the end, contextualizing that. And because typically when people, that grief processing happens when people have to shove it down at the time, which happens. It happened to me. That's why I'm here today, is because my first journey was in my training. I hadn't done psychedelics in 30 years, and I had low dose RDT, and I got really high, and it was a whole processing of my dad's passing. And I mean, he had died 10 years ago. But when he died, I was the one who was responsible for organizing all the things and I let out this cry. And my wife and I lived in LA at the time in a tiny little apartment. And I let out this whelp. And she's like, rightfully so. She's like, shh, because the kids. And I went,
oh.
And then 10 years later, I could cry.
Yeah.
And it was just and it was beatific. It was like that place where pain meets love, which is we see a lot in journeys. I mean, that's why we have masks we use mindful masks. We have a tear catcher.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those mindful masks too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because you probably, I'm assuming, but I'll ask you, did you know you were holding that cry in for all those years?
No. And that's what was fascinating, because leading up to that training, I read everything you could possibly read on ketamine. And there's this, in the literature, they're talking about this process of trauma to completion. And, when I came in, they're like, I'm like, what is your thing? Because they have to give a diagnosis. And I'm like, anxiety. I'm an serial entrepreneur. I got a lot of things. And, okay, cool. And then this whole grief thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's processing this trauma. And it matched the literature. And that's when I got excited about it, because my experience was matching the literature. And I like replicable things. I don't want to be a person selling something to people that's not real.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the magic of where we are right now with our understanding of trauma, is that it's stored in the body, right? It lives in the body. What happens is something happens and we are busy. We are on a fast track, or, our partner, somebody says, oh, don't feel that thing, like what happened to you. And so the body, the subconscious mind says, oh, you're busy. Let me hold on to this until you have time to process it. And then we just keep going. And then maybe it might be a ketamine journey or a meditation retreat, kind of that first stop where all of a sudden things get loosened, and that repressed, unprocessed stuff starts to come up, and people think, oh, what's wrong, right? Because we have this hierarchy of emotions, right? We want to feel a certain type of emotion, we don't want to feel another type of emotion, but our body, our subconscious mind doesn't have that hierarchy. It doesn't have that preference. And so it says, okay, let's bring this up and out. You finally have time to deal with it. And that could happen when you're in the journey, or it could happen in the hours, days following, which is why it is nice to create that space around the journey so that whatever has to come up has that safety, has the space to do so.
Yeah, for sure. Like body keeps a score. I mean, I honestly like, to me, it's a hypothesis that's a theory. I'm not really sure it's true. Um, I definitely think that our body holds tension. And when we're really involved in our body and it's really tight, it stops, neurological processes for sure. I think that's why ketamine, what it does is because it disconnects a person from their body. And then, so I think the release is better. Now, for sure, the hypothalamus and the thalamus keep the score. Okay, like that I can say for sure. That's the core scorekeeping is there, right? And that's an artifact of evolution. It's part of us. So I prefer to like think of it in those terms rather than the body. I know, and again, I haven't seen any evidence that it's the case, and I stand to be corrected. I've been loving, but I think for sure ketamine. I think because it disconnects a person from their body feels floaty or free. Then that tension, which is holding it back, that gets released, and then people absolutely can start processing things because there's a sense of safety that people get, and that's reliable, which is cool. I'm sure you've seen in your own clients, like just like I'm safe, I'm okay. I have a thing, I call it the Big Five, and so the Big Five, and I find that virtually everybody finds their healing in one of these five baskets, and usually it's about getting to the last one. And so this is the Big Five. I am safe. I am loved. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Let go with the flow.
Mm.
And it seems like most people really just want to get to the place where they can just let go with the flow.
Yeah.
It stands to reason. I mean, so I've seen that. That's just my little, one of those things you develop after doing we've almost done 1,000 journeys.
Wow.
In our clinics. So we see so many different kinds of people.
What a gift to see so many kinds of people, to again notice those patterns, right? To be able to come up with those five of like, these are the five sort of buckets that somebody wants to fall into. And it could be multiple, but really acknowledging that, I say this all the time with so much love and compassion, that the human experience is so basic.
It is so basic, and I see it all the time. And sometimes clients, they look at me like I'm some type of intuitive. And I'm like, no, I've just seen it. I just did an intake with somebody. And so, they have anxiety. So I'm saying, you have a tough self-critic that beats yourself up because of the way you feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Checks out.
Yeah, exactly. I talk about the inner critic, the like self-bully a lot. And people also think that I'm some sort of prophetic, but I've just been working with my own and other people's inner critic for almost 10 years now. So it becomes easy to recognize and easy to spot. And there's so many, I want the world to really understand the therapeutic benefits, the life-changing benefits of shining a light on that stuff, right? Where we often want to push it away. We don't know how to deal with it. And when we are able to actually just look at it, there's transformative benefits just from that.
Oh, absolutely. And just noticing it. And that's where I think, some just using a cognitive construct to take a look at it, whether it be like a person's coming down for the medicine, we might facilitate and say, so now for this song, going back to preparation, just bring to mind that part of yourself, that self-critic, that bullying self-critic. Just take a look at it. An image, a thought, a feeling. And then we take a pause, and we have a great song when we do this exercise. And then I'll say, so now just welcome it. Hello, bully self-critic. I see you. I acknowledge you. I've got you. You're okay. But just sit with it. Just nurture it. Don't push it away. And I will tell you, it's cross. I mean, we've done this with hundreds of clients, and we can plug in bully self-critic, self-driver, whatever that thing that's really antagonizing them, which is really a protector of sorts, to use and then people get some real insight from it, and they see that it's part of them, and that's okay. Um, Really, like a lot of lately, it's the big vibe for me lately is really sort of helping clients develop the ability to be their best friend,
Mm-hmm.
because people are really all alone. And they are. Even in relationship, even in good relationship, you're still alone in a lot of ways. And so that's really like, it's an old verse from the Bible. It says in Hebrew, in English, love your neighbor as yourself. Sounds great. But if you don't love yourself, you're not going to be able to love anybody else. And if you're loving yourself in not great ways, I don't want you to love me that way.
Yeah. Amen to that. And I think we could see a lot of examples of that out in the world. You don't have to look far to see people not being in the vibration of treating themselves really well. And how can you treat others well if you're missing that piece for yourself?
Yeah, and like when you see we do, every client that comes in, we do an ACE and resiliency score. So, we're working regularly with high ACE scores. We're working regularly, like in the resiliency test, when they're like, my mother loved me when I was little. My father loved me when I was little. And you have 5 options. And one of them is, it's definitely true, probably true, not sure, probably not true. So my mother loved me when I was little, not sure. My father loved me when I was little, definitely not true. And so, this is the epidemic of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to comment real quickly in case anybody listening doesn't know what an ACE score is. It's the Adverse Childhood Experience score that was developed to try to find sort of a level playing field of people's childhood experiences at a time when we had the understanding of, capital T trauma, lower T trauma, and kind of putting them on a different scale. Because on the ACE sort of quiz, whatever you want to call it, there's also things about the type of resources that you had growing up, and so it's still a very valuable tool for understanding where people are in the support they receive growing up. So
And that the big one for us is a resiliency scale, because that's like what your feeling of love, because a lot of it really is attachment loss. And what I'm very personally really into is understanding attachment loss at a neuropsychological level, which is what are the subcognitive affect systems that are affected. For example, like, and there's an author, and I highly recommend everybody who wants to look at this field. A gentleman's name is Dr. Mark Solms, Solms, and he wrote a book called The Inner Spring, or Hidden Spring, and he builds on ideas of a guy named Panksepp, which was identifying core affect driving systems that all mammals share, and those would be lust, rage, panic, grief, which is the same system. First, the baby, the little baby bear panics because mommy's not there, and they move into grief. And those are the more negative affects. And then fear, of course, which is that trepidation. You're a baby bear. Do I walk across? Maybe a wolf's going to eat me. And then you have the positive affect systems, the seeking system, which is like enthusiasm, which is one of the ones that really we see a lot of times post-treatment. A lot of clients get their mojo back. And then also the caring system and the play system. And a lot of this is play, is sort of really moving out of like this grief system. And grief can be not just loss for a loved one, but there's loss. I mean, there's loss all over the place. It's social loss. It's if were a kid and you're made fun of, that's social hierarchy loss, which is really profound. And then, of course, you create these internal working algorithms, protector mechanisms, and you're looking at the world like that. And now you're 40, and now you're 50. So we see that a lot. And the nice thing is there's the ability to change. We see it. Not every, and this is really, like I always tell people, psychedelics, they're not a miracle. They're not an oracle. Like I tell folks, if you're looking for existential questions, answers to questions why, you're in the wrong place now. And because there's so much hype, right? Because of Johns Hopkins and that mystical experience, the mystical, score that mediates benefit. We don't see that at all. It's actually very low on the thing that mediates benefit for us. But there's safety and love and connection and feeling like you belong, but not really. Rarely do we get like a mystical experience that really mediates the benefit.
That's interesting. Do you think that depends on the dosage that you're working with as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, because we're not going so high where people are going to have this, like, an ego dissolution or near ego dissolution. I do work with a lot of clients who've done other medicines, very high dose. I work with a lot of veterans, and they go and do their ayahuasca or their 5-MeO, and they come back and they're just scrambled eggs.
Mm-hmm. Scrambled eggs, yeah.
Because they're sincere, but it's this meaning making phenomenon where people are looking for the oracle and like, what's the answer? And I tell folks, I say, really, if you're looking to become deeply comfortable with not knowing why, then you're in the right place.
And what a gift that is. I mean, I think that's the entire benefit of working with psychedelics, is getting comfortable with not knowing, getting comfortable with, because it's not, people aren't looking for answers. People are looking for the one right answer that doesn't exist, right? And that's why people go on this seeking journey of, well, it wasn't that, because the unhealed subconscious mind that's stuck in trauma, old patterning, whatever you want to call it, it works in absolutes. So it says, I need something that's true 100% of the time. And that doesn't exist. And so really getting people into the mystery, I think, is a huge sort of soft skill that psychedelics teach.
Yeah, and I think it's just a wisdom thing. I find that a lot of clients, just because of the breakdown of family for sure, but also religion, most people after they're 12 or 13, they're done with it. Usually it's coming from an authoritarian framework also. And so there's just some wisdom axioms that are not there. And giving themselves a break, like there's that they're not even aware there's a whole world of way to live where not knowing is okay. Where it's like, because that secret thing is ever seductive, ever elusive. With ketamine especially, that's where, like, if you read like John Lilly and the ketamine dreams, and it was always like, if I just go deeper, if I just go a little bit deeper, I'll get it. And it's like, like The Who, there's a song band, The Who, and they have the song, I don't get to get what I'm after till the day I die. And I think that's a big thing that people are looking for. And where does meaning come? Is there like sometimes, certainly not all the time, but definitely we have clients that have visions and is the vision a message to decipher? Like, is it a letter to decipher? Or rather, is it a new fodder for you to create meaning, a new scaffolding to create meaning? And I prefer the latter view, because the first one, you can get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also, in a different stage of my life, was going through the landmark forum, etc. And one of the takeaways that I still carry into my life and work now, even though a lot of it has dropped off, is, life is empty and meaningless unless you give it meaning. So a lot of times people will come and say, oh, I saw this in my journey, or I experienced this, I heard this. What does it mean? And the question is, well, what do you want it to mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And a lot of times what we do to help people parse that is we distill to emotional tone, which is non-arguable. For example, had a client once, really cool guy, a Sheboygan guy, actually, a farmer. Like, we get farmers here, and it's not so much lately. And I think that's because of proliferation of ketamine and online options, because people used to drive in 3 or 4 hours, and it's a lot. But this guy, really cool guy. It was a really cool journey too, because during the journey he was moving his hand in strange ways, and then it turns out later during debrief that he was grew up in really sad story. His parents were alcoholics. He had to go live with his aunt on this farm. And he saw his aunt in the vision, and he was doing sign language saying, I love you on
Oh.
the journey. And he said it's the first time in 40 years his that he just calmed down, that he didn't feel anxiety. But at one point he said he saw this African American woman wearing a white turban. And he said, what does it mean? I said, well, what did it feel like? He said, it felt like I have a place, like I belong. I said, go with that. Because that's not arguable. You felt it. You don't have to speculate as to meaning.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, that there is the wisdom in how things make us feel, right? It's I don't know, I'm looking at a bottle of water next to my desk, right? For me, I look at a bottle of water and I think, oh, I think support, I think health, I think goodness, right? But someone can look at a bottle of water and have a totally different experience, right? It's that concept of emptiness, right? Like that it really is the meaning that we instill into things that gives it meaning.
Well, and feeling is real. Feeling's not a construct. That's an affect system. It's subcognitive. And a lot of what people are trying to do is they're really trying, they're coming in and calling us because they don't feel good. And, and there's parts of the brain, like in the tip of the brainstem, the para-aqueductal gray, that if you stimulate the ventral part of that, it makes you feel really good. And if you stimulate the back of it, it makes you feel terrible. And so these are really deep, and that's what's really interesting about ketamine, because it's of course it's promiscuous. It hits so many receptors, but some hypotheses think that you're resetting like homeostats basically, like these algorithmic homeostats in the deep brain, and I often feel that way because when I talk to clients and I see, I'll give you a thought experiment. Anna. So, first of all, just empathy. So the word empathy originally was used in Europe in the art world. You look at a painting, like I see that turtle on the back of your wall there, right? And so I look at that and go, what does that turtle feel like? Okay. That's empathy. That's originally, it's more if we don't use it, but that's originally. And so if you think about a thermostat, and say it's set for 70, and then a polar vortex comes in. We get those occasionally. Not this year, thank God, but like 2 years ago we had one. And then it just drops. Okay? And it's sending a signal, turn on to the thermos. Turn on, turn on. Now, and then when that thermostat gets back to 70, what is the thermostat? How does it feel? And what it feels is like, I'm okay. And how many times in journeys is that what we're seeing? I'm okay. Everything's okay. I'm okay. I deserve this. I'm okay. Deeply, but it's not like, I'm okay. It's not cognitive. It's subcognitive. It's an affect. And we really work on that. That's like, I really enjoy like an affect driven approach.
Yeah, because our conscious minds, right? We can, especially with technology and AI and everything, we can think ourselves into and out of 1,000 thought loops a minute, really. And it's the affect, it's the knowing, the visceral feeling that is the marker of truth, because it's not moving at the same pace, and it's not as whimsical.
Right. And it's like the language. I used to have a consumer brand, and they call it's a non-arguable attribute. You're not like, you can say like, I'm the best tasting, but that's arguable. But if you say like, we're all natural, that's not arguable.
I like that.
And I think that and what clients are looking for a lot of times is when they connect with that, and then of course, how do you groove that in integration? And that's a big part of what we do, is working to take these journeys, and we have different techniques that we do to really help people integrate their journeys effectively. It's one thing to generate neuroplasticity, but if you have a bunch of Play-Doh and you don't shape it, like what's the point?
Agreed.
Then
Yeah.
I'm just getting you high, which is cool, but it's not the point.
Yeah, it's there's therapeutics to the light show, but it's not, they're momentary, they're fleeting. Whereas the true power can come into that integration piece, where for those coming to ketamine to change their lives, it is a full approach, as you said, right? The 40 to 60 minutes of intake, the prep call before the session, and then really equipping people with integration tools after. I really, really believe that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's gold standard. I mean, that's the reality. It's just it really is gold standard. And typically speaking, like we've made some discoveries. We found that people don't need to do this very often for success. Um, most of our clients will do 3 journeys over the course of 180 days or even more, which is great. And again, it's a psychedelic approach. We don't want to get people high too much. It's a lot. These can be really powerful experiences for people. And I think that, in terms of, you were talking about before we got on the call or got on the thing about, a trauma informed approach. And I really think that ultimately speaking, our core view is, and it's sort of the emerging neuroscience of psychedelics, which is coming from like, Robin, I think it's, Cahart Harris. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's Carhart or Cahart.
Yeah, Dr. Rob Carhart Harris. Yeah,
and
drug use
yeah,
for
and
grown-ups.
talking about the rebus model and this idea of internal working models and recalibrating, rearranging those, and we see that so regularly. And also, it's really nice for clients because it really depathologizes what they're dealing with. And they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Yeah, well, when you grow up and your dad used to dangle you off the roof, and when you cried, he didn't let you up until you stopped crying. Yeah, that's going to kind of create an internal working model of lack of safety. And go figure, that's why you feel the way you do. Like, of course you're going to feel that way. What? And people are like, really? They're like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not hopelessly screwed up. And we have a lot of clients that come in, they think there's something deep that they're trying to figure out. And that's based on another myth that our brains are these like amazing error-free memory retention machines. I mean, it's wet, it's sloppy. Memory traces are sloppy. They're error-prone. You got to take it with a grain of this idea that there's a root cause. It's all coming from like early 20th century psychology, where if you just unlock the code, and there's a lot of that in the psychedelic space. A lot of that kind of like, what I would say is flimsy dogma.
There's a lot of seeking. Yeah, I see that a lot of people doing journey after journey after journey without integrating, without preparing, without even asking the question of, if I'm on this hunt and I'm looking for something, how do I know when I found it?
Yeah, it's ever seductive, ever elusive, and when people talk, they come in with us, we'll tell them in terms of change. Well, I am in Wisconsin, and so we have the Green Bay Packers. So I'll say, for example, I'll have a client come in suffering from CPTSD, and it turns out that that in therapy, they've at least got to the point where they would like to, they're comfortable with exploring working on compassion and understanding for their parents' limitations, which is typically where it ends up with CPTSD to some extent. And I'm not talking forgiveness. That's a different thing. Forgiveness is a whole other thing. And because there's a lot of confusion. I work with a lot of clients who are devoutly Christian, and they beat themselves up because they can't forgive people for terrible things because they think they're supposed to. And because of my Jewish background, I kind of inform them it's not so precisely that that's the way it works. And if someone doesn't apologize, you don't necessarily have to forgive. But you can get them out of your head with compassion and understanding for other people's limitations, because it's all ancestral stuff mostly. 4 generations back, like, where your ancestors were, they were in Europe and they were serfs, or it wasn't like everyone was like princes and nobles. They all it wasn't like life sucked back then. For the most part, it was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and what
And
a
so
gift to bring that to this peer-to-peer model that you're offering, right? That acceptance, that acknowledgement of how hard things were, because I know in my personal experience, I'm an immigrant in this country, and a lot of it took a lot of growth and a lot of maturity for me to be able to look back and say, it was everything. It was amazing and it was heartbreaking. It was uplifting and it was earth shattering. It was to expand our understanding that things aren't so black and white, because sometimes people think, oh, if I say that it's bad, it erases the good, but really opening up to a higher level of acceptance of the human experience that's meant to be everything.
Well, and I think that you're bringing a good point, that it's the way I look at it, and I see it too. So like my theoretical background might be, because I was saying earlier, I was Orthodox Jewish, and I learned Kabbalah like in the original text for many years. And so this idea that the heart mediates between, one hand is the best translation would be pain and tough things, and the right hand is unbounded love, unbounded kindness, and sort of the place where they meet, which is called beauty, is where pain meets love. And it's sort of like, we get a lot of clients and they'll get very emotional, not in a bad, they're sad, but it's beatific and it's human. It's human. And that's where, like, especially when I'm working with a lot of people with fundamentalist religious backgrounds, connecting with the humanity, that like, I had this one client, and she had this, we don't get negative journey, but she had this whole descent into red pentagons, and she was like, I'm going to hell, I'm not saved. And then as we debriefed, it turns out this is like a 60-year-old lady. It turns out that in the 70s, she was, became the, got this lead role in the cabaret play at high school, and went home, and her father proceeded to call her a slut. Right. And that was it. She stopped dancing. And this idea that like, she's not perfect. And I was like, Jesus was a human being. That was the point. She's like, oh yeah. And it's amazing how little shifts can just nudge people. Like everything's all ready to go. That's why this medicine's a catalyst. And when people come in with a landscape of elements to catalyze, it's wonderful. Like, that's why great therapy, like lately we've enhanced our relationship with some local therapy clinics because of that, because they do a really good job at helping people create that inventory, that landscape.
Yeah. What a beautiful message, right? Of just like how human we are, how just really human we are, having this wonderful human experience.
Oh, it's great. And it's wonderful for people to just shift into a different non-ordinary state temporarily, and learning that consciousness is fungible.
Absolutely.
And then coming back, because it's not in the heavens. It's about, making changes day to day. And I tell folks, I'm like, like that CPTSD example I gave. And so we did this exercise, and during the journey, I said, as you held space on your mom and compassion and understanding for limitations, what came up for you? She said, I saw myself being swaddled by my mom in a blanket. And I see now that she loves me just as much as I love my kids, but she was so limited. And that one journey vision was all it took.
Yeah.
And I tell clients, I'm like, that's a 40-yard touchdown. Yeah. I said, that doesn't happen usually. I said, what we're really aiming for is like first yard, 10-yard screenplay, like, the 8-yard screen pass to get a first down. That's what we're looking to do. The big stuff, it happens, but it's rare.
It's good to set those expectations, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Well, this has been so delightful. Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with before we close this out?
Well, thank you so much. So if you're in the state of Wisconsin, please look us up, perspectivewellness.org. And we're a great organization that helps people, and we do this work. And for a broader audience, if anyone is a facilitator, prescriber, therapist, and you're looking, we provide ketamine-assisted therapy, psychotherapy, practical skills training. And so a lot of folks have done mainstream programs. Maybe it's Fluence or IPI, or they've done like a ketamine retreat, and maybe they've done Journey Clinical. They got qualified with some online program, maybe 6 hours of ketamine training, but then they're like, well, how do I actually do it with real clients?
Right.
And so that's our sweet spot for training. And so you can go to our website, and we offer trainings, usually about we do one a quarter. Our one in April was just sold out. It's very well-renowned training, or reputable training, I guess you will, because we've been out there for a while, and it's a really wonderful, lots of value. I wrote a book, so you get our book about the essential guide to ketamine facilitation, and we have a Google Classroom with lots of examples. Everything for somebody to, if they're like, they've done one of the experiential trainings, they're like, now what do I actually do? Which is hard because a lot of the trainings are very, there's just a lot of information which might not be so clinically useful. And so this is all, like, I had one review and he said 100% of what I learned was useful. And
Wow.
That was like a testament. So that's all I would say, is encourage folks to check it out. And it's very reasonably priced also. And half of the cost of the training goes to support our sliding scale, which is really a big deal, because we really basically give it away.
That's really
for
beautiful.
a lot of clients.
Yeah, and we'll have all of that linked in the show notes so people don't have to go too far to look for it, because that sounds like a great resource. And the more that we can equip the facilitators and the people helping, the healing, the more we want to do that, for sure.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Anna, so much. I've really enjoyed this time with you, and you have a great way about organizing this. You were really well organized. Thank you. It was really nice to meet you.
Likewise, Justin. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning into Ketamine Connections with me today. If this episode supported you, the best way to say thank you is by sharing it or leaving a review. And if you're enjoying the show and you want to connect more, I would love to see you on my newsletter. That is where I share behind-the-scenes insights, thoughtful guidance, and other parts of your ketamine journey. Never spam, always fun, and honestly, since getting kicked off of social media in 2024, it's where I share the real stuff. I share stories, tools, updates that I don't post anywhere else. So sign up at any of the links in the show notes, and you'll be the first to know when I'm hosting live Q&A or when I'm doing other fun things that are not available anywhere else. It's the best place to hear about it, stay connected, and grow together. All right, that is all I have for today. Thank you. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.